So thank you for being with us, Sal. This is the first Zoom with Paperboy. You saw Paperboy briefly.
I did.
The reason we're doing this is because you know, the political system in New York is very convoluted, very
Well,
simple, but convoluted.
it's really broken. But go ahead.
Well, I didn't want to use the word broken yet because
Okay.
it is what it is. And you have been, the first time I met you, it was at the I believe at a Chelsea club where you were talking and presenting your plan and the democracy voucher. And I started to get intrigued and learn a little bit more about it. And I realized that's what we need. But here the discussion is more about you and your experience and your history, having been through the process since the early 80s, late 70s and early 80s, all the way to 2017.
Right.
So you have a breadth of experience, and Paperboy here is the young man or the young candidate that is learning the process like I learned it 15 years ago.
Got it.
Now we're passing our knowledge to the youth so they can figure out that they can see that the system is broken and they can make proposal on how to fix it in the future. But we need to give them a point of reference because it seems that the way we have been learning is by we the candidate run for something, we're upset about something, we see our politician, they tell, oh yeah, if you want to change, run. And then we discover the process, and it takes 15 years to discover the process.
Yes.
There is two ways that the story ends usually. It's either you get elected, that's the good story, or you hit a wall and you become like a total libertarian anarchist saying, I don't want anything with politics ever again. The system is broken, it's too complicated. I don't know how to change it. So the idea of this Zoom, of this series, is really to explain the process through a historical context. And this is where you come in, Sal. And I will let you, Sal, and Paperboy talk about it. And Paperboy will ask the question as a youngster, asking how it works.
Well, my history is unique. I spent. I was in government as an elected official um, up from 1982 to 1997. Then I went into the private sector, where I've been for the last, since the present time. But I would say to any candidate that my situation was kind of unique. It was actually accidental. I was a school teacher, and I was involved in my community. I saw that things were not working as well as they should, and I decided to run for the school board. And I was elected by 9 votes. Just my sister was managing my campaign, and then when I got to the school board, I was totally unhappy with the elected officials in the area. I thought they were doing a lousy job, and as a school board member, and I was fairly independent and outspoken, I was able to generate interest amongst a lot of grassroots folks, parents, just community activists. And then I started my own Democratic political club, and I decided to run against the machine, and through a grassroots effort. We had no money. We just had a lot of volunteers, which is a very important aspect of running for office. You can't do it on your own. And when I got into the arena, I saw how difficult it is to get on the ballot. And we had to bring it. Fortunately, I had some smart people that helped me navigate the political obstacles that are placed in front of everyone running for office. As you know, and Paperboy knows, it's the political system does everything they could, the political class, to obstruct insurgents. That's the way the system works. I was able to get through that, and in 1978, I beat the machine in the Democratic primary, and then I went to run in the general election against a Republican, and the Republicans were very strong in that area. And unfortunately, I lost that election. But what I did see was that the regular Democratic political apparatus was actually aligned with the Republicans. So I decided that I was going to go out and run for district leader, Democratic district leader, and I put a grassroots effort together, and I beat the incumbent. And then in 1982, I decided to run for the New York City Council against someone who was in office 21 years, and we caught the guy sleeping. We had 400 volunteers, and I knocked on doors for 2 years. That's why it's important to really build that foundation. You just can't go out and run. And we pulled off a major upset. We won the Democratic primary, and then when I went on to win the general election. And it was a major story in all the New York papers, because the guy that I beat was the Republican minority leader who had been in office 21 years. And no one gave us a chance of winning, but we caught the guy sleeping. We had a great grassroots effort. I had some labor support. I'm a strong union supporter. I was a school teacher, so I had some good labor support. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had a lot of volunteers. And I got elected in '82, and then on the city council, you probably know my record. I was independent. I never really, I never was a reliable vote for the leadership, because when I thought the public interest was at stake, I would vote against the leadership. I voted against. I was the only vote against the speaker candidate, because I thought the candidate was not strong enough on being an advocate for all New Yorkers. So I was, for 15 years there, I was an outsider, but I did a lot of great work. I used the press to generate interest in my positions and issues. I faced some really stiff competition, because they tried to take me out a couple of times. I prevailed. Once again, I always kept close to my base. I never really depended on the politicians or the political clubs. I was always connected to regular people in my district, and I was able to prevail. Then I ran for mayor in '97, because I thought Rudy Giuliani was a disaster, a bad man, and I lost the Democratic primary to Ruth Messenger, and I did fairly well. We had no money. I garnered 22% of the vote, and then I went into the private sector, because I think I'm not somebody who wants to stay in legislative office. I don't think it's healthy. I'm a term limits guy. I was one of the people that pushed term limits in the city. So I served. I loved it. But if I have any message to convey to people, it's establish a reputation in the community, connect with real people. I know it's hard to do. It's not easy, especially now. There isn't as much political connection as there was in the past. For some people, turned off the politics for good reason. So you got to really generate somehow interest. And one of the advantages today, Theo, as you know, and we're doing it right now, is social media. So I didn't have that in my day. So if folks can talk to other people through social media, Facebook, Instagram, Zoom, and what have you, you can build a base of support. As long as you have something solid to offer, and realize that you're going into an arena where the odds are that you will be obstructed at every turn as you try to become a viable candidate, and not get frustrated. Persistence is the key. Persistence, grassroots engagement, and constantly explaining to people how corrupt the system is, and they get it.
Oh, yeah, the corruption of the system, they do get it. But yes, like it's interesting, because when you started your explanation, you talk about starting a political club. And when I met Paperboy, the first thing that was lacking in his district was a political club. And basically, I sent Paperboy without any explanation to one of the political club being created in Bushwick, and it was kind of funny to get his perspective on it. I mean, Paperboy, I see you're muted, so maybe that's why we cannot hear you. But can you tell us the story of the political club you went to the first time where I sent you? Like you as a founding. So
Yeah, I'm sharing our live stream out so everyone can see us. But you know, that was very interesting to me. The starting of the political club and seeing how, you know, the bylaws are set up, seeing how it kind of comes together, seeing who the group of people who form it are, and how they are able to position themselves as leadership of the club, and then use that position to then have political influence in the community and kind of shape that. And you know how hard it is to actually do community research to make sure that people that are in the community are also um, being reached out to, are also being involved in this process. Because a lot of what I see is, you know, how you were mentioning, Saul, about how a lot of people are already, you know, turned off to politics. And for those who are civically engaged, having to make a true effort to reach out to them, to bring them in, to get them excited. You know, this is kind of one of the main reasons that I wanted to run, is because everyone gets upset about Donald Trump and Joe Biden and, you know, Bernie Sanders, the presidential elections, and then they completely are blinded to everything that's happening in their ground locally, from the school board to city council, to all of the offices that the average citizen, I would venture to say, doesn't even know exists. But the people who are in power, it's to their advantage to keep the average citizen in the dark about the power that they control.
Well, let me say,
So,
Paperboy, you've made some great observations, and you're right on target. I mean, fact is that most people can't name who their city council member is, who the member of the assembly is, and that's where a lot of the action is in terms of quality of life in the community. And you're right, the people that are in office really want to keep the turnout low. They don't want engagement, and as a result, we have, in my opinion, a terrible political class in New York. I mean, it's just we see this in the pandemic, how badly prepared New York City has been to a foreseeable pandemic. And you know, we pay these people. That's what they're supposed to be doing, is to plan, to think ahead. And most people, like you pointed out, don't see the connection between the local underground elected officials and the quality of life in the city. So they focus on the presidential, which is important, obviously. I mean, we're all focused
right.
on that. But on the neighborhood level, it's really the local folks, and they have some real. If they want to use some clout, they have it. But most of the time, they're captives of the political class. They almost become they become part of a, I call it the sixth organized crime family in New York, the political class. They become so detached, or want to be detached from regular folks, and basically all they want to do is get reelected. Most of them. I mean, there's some talent out there, some smart people, but the bottom line is many of them just want to stay in office, and and and
Exactly.
and the lack of participation on the local level certainly enhances their ability to stay in office. You know, you have a low turnout. You kind of focus on some special interest groups in the community. You know, and you get reelected, despite the fact that you're really not functioning on behalf of the public interest. You're a captive of lobbyists, political consultants, and you become part of the. You start socializing with those folks.
Exactly.
You become part of a part of the woodwork of the political class, and really do everything you can to reduce involvement. Political clubs. You guys are too young. The political clubs years ago were
Hmm.
jam packed with neighborhood folks. There was a connection. As bad as the politics were in those days, and there were some bad aspects of it, corruption or what have you, but there was a connection between the people that represented them and local folks. Political clubs were jam-packed. You know, they were the centers of community activity. I ran for mayor, and I went to political clubs around the city. The attendance is dismal in most of these clubs, you know, and also you find that a lot of really smart people, we have a lot of smart people in the city, they disregard local politics. They think, why are you involved? They think it's irrelevant, but they're wrong. And we see that, you know, one of the things I've been repeatedly saying in this pandemic crisis is it exposes how bad the political system, especially in New York, is, because a crisis exposes incompetence. And we have seen that. And now maybe people will say, you know, we need to elect some people with talent and with some people who really care about the city to these offices.
So let me ask you a question. You know, based on what you said, because they do such a good job of kind of gatekeeping who actually gets in, who gets involved, who even has the information, right? There's such a lack of information. You know, the same people that run the government run the public schools. They could have classes and seminars and consistently let us know how to run for public office and your state office and city office based on where you live, right? But obviously they don't do that for their own reasons. So my question to you is this. What would you say is the kind of makeup of the traditional person that you see in the politics here in New York, local politics, kind of the makeup of their background as far as the jobs that they've held, and then kind of their ideology, and you know, what kind of motivates them, that kind of the current political class that we have, what kind of motivates them pre getting into politics? You know, what's kind of their background? Where are these people coming from, basically?
Well, I don't think, my view is that for example, I was a school teacher when I ran for office. I spent 11 years as teaching in the New York City public schools, and I was not active in political clubs. I was just active in community activity. What we have now is a lot of professional politicians, right? They many of them don't have any real skills or backgrounds. I mean, I would love to see, for example, you know, folks that are actors running for office, people that are police officers, teachers, doctors, nurses, you know, people that have backgrounds, professional backgrounds in areas where they actually bring and contribute to the political discussion in New York City and can bring that expertise into governing. What we have now, to focus on your question, is a lot of professional politicians, people that start working for politicians out of college or even out of high school, and then basically, you know, go work in a political office, you know, whether it be in the city council, the assembly, and just wait their turn to run for office, and it becomes their ideology is, you know, there's conservatives and liberals and what have you, but most of these folks just want to stay in public office. You know, they don't have, a good percentage of these folks are unemployable, in my view. I mean, they don't have many skills. I mean, it's the truth. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, and buts in there. And they want to stay, you know, either in a political job or run for office. You know, they kind of just wait their turn, and what happens is you become sort of desensitized to public service, and it becomes about you know, issuing press releases and what have you, instead of having a political system that is open, and we can bring in, you know, really talented people who are out there, you know, serving on the city council for 8 years or 10 years, and then go back to what you were doing before. You know, like for example, you know, our forefathers back in the day, many of them did have other occupations, and they brought that to the legislative process. They weren't professional politicians, and that's what we have today. In my opinion, not very skilled, and their main objective is how do I stay in office as long as I can? and then that's what they're good at. They're good at navigating a broken political system. I mean, we got people that have been in office 35, 40 years in the assembly. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, and you look at these names.
So my question to that, not to cut you off, my question to that then,
Yeah,
because that's a big issue for me, right? Term limits and using term limits as a way to keep people honest, to help control the power, to make sure the power doesn't get too controlled with one person. So
right, entrenched.
Right. And unfortunately, those who are in power are the ones who have the power to enforce term limits. So how do we, put the pressure on these people? Because like you said, their main goal is to stay employed. It's not to end homelessness. It's not to end poverty. It's to, at the end of the day, make sure that I have a job for as long as possible until I am old and senile or have a terminal illness. I mean, that's what really struck out to me, is that a lot of these people will not leave office unless they have a terminal illness, and it's at the point where they're going to die in the next 6 months. And I don't mean to say that in a way that is insensitive at all, but it sticks out to me that, hey, if you're dealing with a serious illness, maybe you'd want to spend this last time with your family or your friends, or just taking it all in, instead of kind of trying to ride out your office. And we see this all the time. So how can we get them to kind of buy into the idea of term limits, even if we have to trick them into it?
Well, you're talking to someone who was one of the advocates of term limits on the city council. They will never do it on their own. What we had in New York City is initiative and referendum. We were able to get it on the ballot in New York City, and the voters voted in term limits for the city council, which I think is a good thing overall on balance. Mm-hmm. But at the state level, we don't have initiative and referendum. So they have to do it on their own. Of course, they're not going to do it on their own, right? Because it impacts their main issue, right? Which is let me stay in office as long as I can. So that's right. A problem. We have. That's why New York is really has a real problem in terms of its political system. California passed term limits. They even got term limits for the governor there. They've got independent redistricting. One of the things they have to work on is public finance in the campaigns, because one of the other ways that they keep people from running or keep people from winning public office is that you have to go out and raise a tremendous amount of money. That's why, as Theo pointed out, I'm promoting what's in place in Seattle, which is democracy vouchers, where every registered voter receives 4 $25 vouchers, and you can go to your neighbors and say, hey, I'm running for whatever office. I would love your support. Can you give me one? Can you give me 1 or 2 of your vouchers? It's really, I think it's the gold standard in public financing. Seattle's had great success with it. And I was on the Charter Revision Commission. I tried to get that passed in New York City, but the political class blocked me, because that would open up the process. You wouldn't have to go to these lobbyists, right, and kneel and genuflect to have them raise money for you, or you wouldn't have to go to a developer and say, hey, I'm running for office. I'm pro-developer. Can I, I'm going to help you with your projects. I mean, which is corruption. It's called pay to play, as you know. So the good news is that there seems to be, when a big city like Seattle adopts something like this, I think that we have a chance of promoting it here in the city. I'm not sure about the state. The state's totally corrupt. Albany is pay to play central. You have a governor who's raised, millions from real estate interest, and, he's in office forever. New Jersey, by the way, and California both have term limits. Governors can't run for more than 2 terms. Their term limits is not a panacea, but as you pointed out, it breaks up the system. It shakes things up, you know, and we see that at the city council level. I think the council, if we had the ability to pass democracy vouchers, right, we would have a lot more talents, because the council is term limited. They could only stay in office for 2 terms. So it opens up opportunities for people like yourself and other folks that are interested in bringing about change. But we still need that other leg. We need real campaign finance reform, because what we have in New York City is not very conducive to grassroots involvement.
So your comments give me 2 questions, and they're kind of separate, but I guess I'll start with one. What is the best way to, because the money is such a big issue, and I also see we have some questions. We have some questions from from some of our participants in the Zoom, so we're going to get to your question soon. But the money is such a big issue, and I know when I first started my campaign, you know, and met with some consulting groups, that's literally all they wanted to talk about. It's not image, it's not about your platform, it's not about your community involvement. It's literally about, okay, how much money do you think you can get from your immediate circle as soon as possible, and then how can you expand that? So what are ways, though, to kind of get around that? I know that it's become kind of the most central thing, but if you're running for an office that, say, normally you need to raise $250,000, $300,000 for, and I know they have the matching funds for city council and things like that, but outside of that, though, what are ways to kind of get around the fundraising and still run a successful campaign, or still run a interesting campaign?
Well, you're without the ability to communicate, and that costs money. It's very, very difficult to do. You know, that's why public financing is so important, because you'll get drowned out by your opposition, because they will mail, they hire these consultants who construct some fictional image of their achievements, and it's hard. You don't have name recognition without the money, and that's a major problem. When I know you're running for Congress, you're talking about running against, you'll need $600,000-$700,000 to compete, which is obscene. It's totally obscene. Right. You should have the ability to get on the ballot, and once you get on the ballot, you should be able to get a grant to run your campaign. Or even get free television time. So there are ways to be able to do that, but it takes reform, and reform only comes when people rise up, right, and demand it. And right now we have a 12% turnout in elections in New York City. Most people are obviously turned off, or they're apathetic, and you've got the incumbents running the show, and it is. Most incumbents, as you and I have just pointed out, want to stay in office. The last thing they want is somebody like you or me, who's an insurgent, with new ideas. I mean, I can tell you my story. When I ran for Congress in 1992 against a Republican, I went to Washington to meet with the Democratic Congressional Committee, and I was talking.
Where was this? Just out of curiosity, what area were you running?
That was South Brooklyn and Staten Island. I ran for Congress there, and the incumbent was Susan Molinari. I was a city council member in Brooklyn. I lost the election. I did well in Brooklyn. I got destroyed on Staten Island because we couldn't compete. We had no money. So I went to Washington to meet with the Democratic Congressional Committee, and I was talking to them about healthcare, about reforming our politics. And to your point, what they said to me was, "We don't give a shit about the issues. How much money can you raise?" So that's it in a nutshell. The system is money soaked, unless you have the ability of a Bernie Sanders, right, who's a senator, and had a broad platform. He was able to raise money from grassroots folks, but that's atypical. Very atypical. That's why public financing is so important to our democracy. Our democracy is in deep trouble. And in New York, by the way, unlike other states, we're kind of in rigor mortis here. There's no movement towards reform because the system is so gridlocked and intentionally by the people that are in office. And the only way to change that is by running, grassroots campaigns and try to take these folks out. That they're resisting public financing, resisting term limits, resisting. They gerrymander these districts. They do everything possible to keep themselves in office. That's the way it is. It's the political class.
So with that being said, a big issue that I have is education of the constituency. And, the average person, one, like you mentioned, they don't know their city council person, they don't know their congressperson, they don't know anybody that represents them except maybe the governor or the mayor or something, and then obviously like the president.
Correct.
So it's a big challenge for me, and especially dealing with younger voters, people who are just disaffected by the political process. It's so hard for them to actually understand, one, what's going on, to the whole process, because even though it's a simple process, it's a lot of complexities in there. And then when you tell them that you're running against whatever incumbent, a lot of times the only things they know about them are maybe some of the good things that they've heard, unless they've had some big scandal. They only know the good things, or they might have seen their name for the last 20 years. So it's like, oh, I love that guy, Jimbo Jim. He's the greatest that there is. They don't know. So it's hard to maybe let them see the corruption that is there because they're not doing the research, because this person isn't they're not Donald Trump, right? So they're not getting reported on every second. You're in fact the one trying to galvanize support to let people know about their corruption. So what's one of the ways to kind of break that down and one, educate the people on the process, and then two, help them see the issues with the incumbents that they think are actually working for them?
Well, I think one of the advantages that you have that I didn't have when I was running is social media. I mean, if you can build up a Facebook base from people around your community, or even a Twitter base, that would be helpful. And possibly schedule yourself to make a video, once a week for 45 minutes on or whatever, on a regular basis, talking about your qualifications and what the incumbent has and hasn't done. That would be helpful. That would be helpful. I mean, I think that's one of the ways, one of the vehicles that you have today, which I didn't have. So a regular Facebook video talking about your qualifications, talking about pointing out things that people don't know about their incumbent, right? They know nothing. And the other problem today, the advantage is good social media outlet. Bad things, a lot of the local newspapers that were covering local officials in the old days, when I was running, they would do investigative pieces on the local elected officials. Now you don't have any local outlets, or very few local outlets, because they don't have the money. The press is pretty much, they laid off reporters left and right. So you've got the situation where, these folks, you're up against people that, use taxpayer money, right, to send out newsletters every 6 months telling the constituents how great they are, right? And so there's no way to counter that. But I think one of the ways, if I had to give anyone running an insurgent for office advice, is use social media. Especially me, you're a young man, you're much more adept at it than guys like me. And there are a lot of folks that are on Instagram and what have you, that can be used to educate people on the intricacies of running for office and the obstacles and all of and also what these incumbents are doing. I mean, for example, how is it that we're paying people a lot of money, $150,000 a year to be city council members, right? There's a pandemic that's raging around the world, right? In Italy, in Washington State. And we don't have one hearing on the New York City's preparedness for a pandemic as it's unfolding in real time. And here we are in mid-March, And it's over. We are the center, the disaster center of the world. Not one hearing on emergency preparedness for a pandemic, as it was foreseeable. So those are things that that have to be raised. I mean, anybody running for office, the mayor, where were you during the pandemic? Did you read the newspapers that that we live in a city, it's high risk? Do you think we should be prepared for a pandemic in New York? If we had closed the city down for 2 weeks prior than we did, we would be saving thousands of lives right now. California did. California has 650 deaths total. We have more deaths in one day in the city of New York than all of California, because they were smart. They did they had good public health officials, good governor there, a couple of good mayors, but I'm just using that as an example, right? Of folks that are really out to lunch.
But you brought something interesting a few seconds ago that I wanted to go back to. You alluded to the media, to the fact that we don't have local investigative media anymore. When I ran for public advocate, I realized how important access to the media was. And I saw, like, for example, Errol Louis in New York has become the gatekeeper of who should be the insurgent candidate. And when I tried to talk to him about creating what is called equal time, basically he laughed at the idea and moved on. And I felt like the system is made that you cannot get any media access except if you pay for it. And for example, Ben Yi, who was running, he showed up on the show only when he made matching fund. After the debate, after everything. So suddenly, what is your take? I mean, you have stronger word than I have, actually, because I'm trying to keep myself diplomatic. And you went at it, when I heard you, like, for the last 25 minutes, you're really going at the political establishment wholeheartedly. And I feel like we shouldn't have changed when you get to 70 years old. You shouldn't be like, you shouldn't be at the prime of your political career at 70. You should be more when you're 50 or 40. And it seemed that all the experience you garner makes it impossible to get, I don't know how to explain that. Like, a young person cannot get on TV if Errol Louis decide that you're not worth it. And
I mean, he's one of, obviously, Errol has a lot of people tugging at him to get on the air, right? So they use certain cutoffs, right? If they see, once again, we go back to what we were just talking about. If you have no money, right? If your bank account, your campaign account is devoid of cash, they're not going to put you on the air, which is unbelievable. I mean, I went through it as a mayor, as a candidate for mayor. I mean, it was like, well, Sal can't win because he has no money, but Sal can't get his message out because he can't get covered. How am I gonna? It's a catch-22, which shows you the corruption of the system, especially when you're running citywide. You're running for public advocate, and you're running against somebody who has a war chest of $1 million or $800,000. You've got $1,000. They're gonna put their notebook away when if you're around trying to talk to reporters. They're not even gonna listen to you, even though you may have some great ideas and you have some really good knowledge on how to solve problems. They're gonna write you off, which is a terrible, terrible thing. And these folks too. Let's face it, the folks that have all this money, Theo. They hire campaign consultants who are connected to the newspapers, to the editorial boards, and they'll say, "Oh, Theo is a flake, or Albanese is a flake," and the papers will buy, and they won't cover you. So when I was running for office, when I was running for mayor, my neighbors would say to me, "Sal, how come you're not being covered by the Daily News or the New York Post?" Well, they made sure that I got blocked, right? So people who may say, Albanese has some really good ideas, but you know what? He gets no coverage. He's not going to win. So, I can't contribute to the campaign. I won't contribute to the campaign because he can't win. He's getting, he's really invisible. And that's the sad part of it all.
Right.
That's why, you know, democracy vouchers, where you can go to your neighbors, you know, instead of spending time on the phone trying to hit up some, you know, lobbyist, some consultant who owns you once you get elected. You go to your neighbors, you know, people live in your apartment house or on your street, and say, hey, I would like your support. And they become real players. They become engaged. And you engage them instead of, you know, spending time trying to reach out to all these lobbyists and consultants who are part of the political class in New York. And I don't hate lobbyists, but they shouldn't be contributing money. They should not be out there raising money
Right.
for candidates, because they've got an agenda.
Right.
And it's not
Yeah.
the public interest; it's their clients. But these are the guys, you know, these are the guys and gals that are raising a lot of the big money for the folks. Look at the people running for mayor this time around. I mean, they're nice people, some of them, but you look at their campaign war chest, and it's all developers, lobbyists, and consultants. So whose agenda are they going to be? They're going to be doing or pushing,
right?
You know. So, but yeah. So, but I think this.
I had a question based off actually what you said, Theo, that I wanted to tack on before you asked is, when I first started running or when I was even looking to run, and this is something people still say, in fact, that and I'm always told to hold back on is, you know, you shouldn't go at the incumbent, you shouldn't go at the current representative too hard, because it's in poor taste to the voters, or it makes you look like you're you know, too crazy if you go too directly, if you attack too directly the incumbent. So what do you say to people that kind of have that ideology? Do you think that's a good strategy, or, you know, for winning, or what would you say?
I think you have to draw comparisons between you and the incumbent. I mean, I don't think a personal attack is smart, like, you know, attacking them personally. But if you point out that they're bought and sold by, you know, hey, so and so is on, you know, accepting money from big pharma, or so and so is accepting money from developers that are really causing major issues in our community. And that's all fair game. I think you're going to draw a comparison, not attack personally, you know, attack their, you know, appearance or whatever. Just focus on the issues. You got to draw a comparison. And you know, and I know people say negative campaigning it sometimes detracts from your effort, but if you focus on the issues and do it in a professional way, and you've got a good demeanor, I can tell you're sincere, people will pick that up. But you've got to criticize the incumbent. I mean, that's why you're in the arena, right? You're in the arena because you want to make a difference, and you want to draw a comparison to the person that holds that office, and you think you can do a better job. You got to point out why.
Right. Okay, that's interesting, because that's always been the thing of, like, you don't want to criticize them too much, and people will look at you a certain way or try to, you know, and even when it's on the issues, it kind of rubs people the wrong way, because some of them like their incumbents, so you want them to like you first before you go too strongly at the incumbents. So I've always dabbled with that.
I don't want to cut you off on that, Paperboy, but let me say this. You got to establish your bona fides first, right? You know, you got to establish that you're a credible person, and then you draw the comparison. I think if you go in, I see that does make sense. If you go in right away and say, you know, so-and-so's terrible, you know, and she's voted this way, she's voted that way. I think first you establish your credibility as a candidate. You know, here's my background. And here's why I think it can do a very good job for the district. And then you draw the comparison. You got to first establish that foundation that you're a credible candidate. That's true. And then start drawing the comparison. But I think that's pretty good. And that's good feedback from anybody who's ever telling you that before you attack, before you compare, you got to establish that you're a viable candidate, and you have the bona fides to hold the office. That would be my advice.
Okay. Theo, before you, I do want you to ask your question. we have some questions in the Q&A, so let me know when we want to get to those. I don't want to leave a person hanging.
I just
so
wanted
gotta-
to segue into the question, because when we first decided to do this format just to test it, and I tweeted you, Sal, about it, would you accept to be the first guest? I had a lot of people from a lot of places actually say, wow, Sal Albanese, I like him. I like him. He's a very good guy. He's very honest, et cetera, et cetera. And when I hear you, I mean, this is really the first time we really have a long one-on-one. And one of the person asking the question here is Diane, who organized the Universal Basic Income March. And she's asking you, would you consider running for office again? And would you support the concept of UBI that Andrew Yang pushed forward? And that would you? That's the question in a way.
I like Yang. I really did like Yang, and UBI made sense. You know, I think Yang, by the way, is one, as you know, one of the candidates that supports democracy vouchers, which attracted me to him. And so did Gillibrand, but Gillibrand never even talked about it. She had it up on on her platform, but she really didn't talk about it. Yang actually mentioned that aspect of political reform, and I thought that was impressive because he got it right. We got to. That's one way to engage folks.
Okay, great. Yeah, her question basically was that, and I want to read it out just so we give her a question fair representation. She says, hello, thank you for this session. I work on the basic income and co-host the Basic Income March. To Sal, would you consider running for office again? Do you support the concept of universal basic income as a method to combat corruption in public programs and to help everyday people have funds to run for office? Paperboy has UBI in his platform. Hi, Paperboy. Hello, Diane, and she also says thank you again. So, so to those questions, would you run for office? You already answered some of the UBI, and do you think that would also help people to have funds to run for office?
Well, I think the democracy vouchers are what would help people run for office, which is what Yang proposed, and certainly I agree with. Yeah, I never say never to run for office, but I may down the road. I'm not as young as you guys, but I would consider it. The only problem I have is I just have a very, very difficult time calling people for money. It's just that's the major crux of my issue. Yang, when you're at that level running for president, you get tremendous exposure as he did. So he was able to raise a good amount of money from folks. But if you're, I have limited name recognition like you, people. I mean, maybe a little more because I was in office, but if people don't know that much about you, and you don't have the resources to convey your platform, it's hard to raise money, which is one of the problems that we have, and we get stuck with folks who can raise money from conflicted sources, hire a consultant who can make you look good through fiction, and you become and you get elected. And that's why we're stuck with mediocrity here. But it's a big problem. But I'm happy to hear that a lot of folks are now beginning to understand how this money-driven system is leading us to folks having people in office who really don't have the public interest, and they're captives of special interests. So I think we're moving. I think I'm optimistic that things are going to change. I mean, especially with this pandemic, people are going to realize the importance of having people in office that have the public interest as their top priority.
So also going off of the pandemic, someone also had a question about what do you think as far as the suspending the objections to petitions during this pandemic, and like how you mentioned, if the city and state acted 2 weeks, 3 weeks earlier, we'd be able to, we could have avoided a lot of deaths. We could have avoided a lot of people getting very sick. So what do you think about, you know, there's a movement to do that in the Manhattan Democratic Club and some Democratic clubs in Brooklyn as well. So what do you think about the movement to do that? And if one was to do it, what are the best ways to kind of try to force the hand or put pressure on those in power to amend this process, because we are in a pandemic, and, you know, to still be able to uphold democracy?
Well, I think that it would make common sense. It's common sense to suspend objection to petitions right now. It's just impossible. So if you've got, if your petitions are generally satisfactory, which in many cases they are, you should be able to get on the ballot. They should suspend all of that nonsense. First of all, people at the Board of Elections are dying. You know, we've had a couple of deaths at the Board of Elections of employees. They should shut that place down right now and do everything through through online as much as possible, because it's very dangerous. But the only way to do that
online. We received the notice. They're going to be doing it online.
Oh, they are? Okay.
We received the notice yesterday. They'll do it online.
However, so the whole hearings will happen online?
Some of it, yes. And there is issue with that, but we can go into the mechanics later. But you bringing up the objection, but I will go a little bit further, because I think the executive order that Cuomo signed is like a piecemeal item, because right now we're starting the independent. Yesterday started the independent petition. People who don't affiliate neither with the Democrat, the Republican, the Green, any party that is recognized in New York, is technically they have 6 weeks starting yesterday to get on the ballot. So to me, it's laughable that the whole pandemic, the way Cuomo is handling this, it's a real big affront to democracy in a way, because now someone cannot get on the ballot.
Well, you're not surprised that Cuomo's doing that, are you?
Oh, no, I'm not surprised. And Paperboy did a very good rap. I don't know if I sent it to you. calling I got the governor mad because he presented the county committee at one of the Brooklyn club, and he said, I'm going to work to find volunteer to get them on the county committee. And then the whole thing is like, oh yes, and he was very defiant, the Paperboy, in that video. And suddenly the governor, there was this video that came out of a Brooklyn club where the governor said, what are those youngsters who think that they're going to talk about Brooklyn and they know what, we're the Democratic Party and we'll do everything to.
I saw that, actually. I saw that clip. Yeah, I saw that clip. Let's face it, once again, at the risk of being redundant, these folks are going to do everything they can to suppress democracy and open up the process. I mean, we need nonpartisan elections. We need independent redistricting. These folks will fight tooth and nail to suppress all of that. So, I'm hoping that, there's a grassroots movement of young people to really make the changes that we need, because it's really about life and death. We're dealing with climate change. We're dealing with pandemics. This is serious business, and you really need leadership. Martin Wolf from the Financial Times yesterday had a great comment. He said, we can overcome as a world, as a city, and as a nation this pandemic. My biggest problem is the leadership. The quality of the leadership and the incompetence of the leadership, this is a big problem. This is why we're in a mess that we're in.
So one thing we're working on is trying also to get. I'm trying to personally is trying to get, like you said at the beginning, actor, doctor, police officer, a lot of people into the county committee to really get a little taste of what the political system work in way to get elected. And I mean, thanks to the new reformer, suddenly I got like 3 retired police officer that joined the county committee on their own. And one thing is, I feel like there is a lot of misinformation being given out there about how the system works. For example, people were telling me, oh, the petitions are incorrect because they're not green. Oh, I cannot be on the I cannot be on the county committee because I'm an active police officer. I need to verify, you know, I need to verify all these things, because participating in the process and having a job in the public sector is not, there shouldn't be one forbidding the
Disqualified.
other. What?
They shouldn't be disqualified, is what you're saying.
No, they shouldn't. They should be
Right.
part, their experience. I mean, it's like this is the room where everybody's talking, but we're saying you're a police officer, active duty. We don't want you in the room. You're a fireman. We don't want you in the room. You're a lobbyist. We don't want. The thing is, the idea is to get everybody together instead of making it harder and only to keep the retirees and the professional politician, basically, the two people who really have time to donate to the cause, and we make sure that anybody else. So I don't know how to approach
Well, anything,
that.
you know, anything that opens up the process, right? I mean, it is helpful, because right now the process is really almost a closed shop, the way the system is structured in New York. I mean, it's just it's incredible, and we're paying a heavy price for it. I want to commend you for, you know, speaking out on this for a while, and Paperboy as well for running. I think it's fantastic. So I think I got to run in a couple of minutes. So
yes, likewise. But yes, we hope that through the process we're going to engage a lot more people from diverse communities to join us and to start doing the first step. And I think that I want to thank you for being in this first video, because I feel that other people need to say, you know, they hear it from me and they go, oh, Theo is, but hearing it from different guests, hopefully they'll get the idea that we need to do something, and it's not very hard, really. It's not complicated.
So
no,
before
yeah.
you, quick question and last question for me before you go, is this: if you had to tell yourself something, I don't know, before you started your political career, if there was one thing that you could tell yourself, or tell a person that you would say is in your position, was in the position that you were before you started running, and when you had that initial motivation to run, if there's one piece of advice that you could give, that you would say, hey, this is a best, you know, this is something that you want in your toolbox, or you know, this is something to look out for, what would that one piece of advice be that you would give someone in your position, that was in your position, that's in the position now that wants to run, basically?
Establish your reputation as being sincere, and showing people that you really care about making a difference. That's the, I mean, that people will pick that up, but you know, it's got to be sincere. It's got to be, it has to be heartfelt, and people sense that, and be persistent, because there are really good people like yourself that are sincere, and they get into the arena, they lose, and then they just go away because they're discouraged, right? So
Right.
I'm one of my, I mean, I may not be the brightest guy in the world, but I'm persistent. So I hung in there, and I was able to get elected. But you know, that a lot of folks just walk away. You know, I had no political. By the way, if you had said to me when I was a school teacher, you know, at 22 years of age, that I'd be a city council member at 33, I would say you're crazy. I had no, you know, it wasn't premeditated. It wasn't, it was not my ambition in life. It's kind of evolved as I saw things around me, and I saw that things were not as they should be. People that were holding positions of power were basically self-dealing. That's how it evolved into public service. But I had no, there was no premeditation. You know, I never, you know, plotted it out. So once again, sincerity, interest in public service, and conveying that to people. That's, and persistence. Those are the areas that I would advise people to really focus on. And some of it is just, you know, and some of it is just internal, right? I mean, and people pick that up. You know, they understand. They have a sixth sense about who's full of shit or not, and that's important.
That no, that you well. Thank you very much for those kind word at the end.
Sorry about that. That's the
No,
Brooklyn
no,
in me.
we're on we're not regulated by the FCC, so you can go at it all you want.
Hey, listen, it was great talking to you guys, and
Thank you very
you know,
much for being our first guest, and hopefully
Yes,
we'll
thank you so
talk
much.
again, and we'll see each other on the circuit.
good.
Yeah, hopefully we
Good.
can see you in real life once social distancing and all that is over.
Very good, Paperboy. Very good. Nice meeting you on the air. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Well,
Bye bye.
Thank you.
all
Bye-bye.
right.
Bye.
All right, so we had Sal. I mean, Paperboy. That's this is a master class by Sal, which is let me hang up with Sal.